We're going to be talking about why not all calories are equal and how and what you guys need to know in order to optimize your nutrition. I'm also going to provide you guys with 3 questions that you can ask yourself to help determine like what foods you should actually be eating. Okay, so a couple things that I hear all the time from either new clients who are just joining or just people in general when I'm having conversations with people are these 2 things. They're very common. Of course, I hear other things too, but the first one is, well, I eat pretty healthy, but I'm still not seeing progress, or I'm still not seeing the progress that I want. The next one is, well, I eat pretty healthy, but I just can't lose weight. You guys have probably been one of those people at some point. I've been one of those people. So as you guys are learning now, training and nutrition, they totally go hand in hand. But optimized nutrition is a huge part. You can literally bust your ass in the gym and still end up going backwards in terms of your results or your progress if you aren't eating properly. You guys have probably seen those people in the gym who look the same year after year after year after year, even though they're working really hard. I've been that person. Probably some of you guys have been that person too. And a lot of it, not all, but a lot of it has to do with nutrition and how people aren't optimizing their nutrition. Everyone who's in here has already taken a huge step because you're at least, you guys are started and you're working on it and you're killing it. But I'm going to tell you how you can optimize it further. Again, nutrition is very individualized. So the majority of these concepts are going to be general, so they will apply to almost everyone here, but it's important to note that every single body is different. It's going to be different at every point in your life. Sometimes you can do like an exact meal plan at one point in your life and try to do that exact meal plan again a year or 2 from now, and your body will respond completely differently. So again, nutrition is very, very individualized, but the concepts I'm going to tell you guys are kind of things that you will be able to apply pretty much regardless. They're very general concepts. Okay, so yes, a calorie is a calorie. It's all 1 calorie is 1 calorie no matter what it's coming from. But there's optimal sources that you can obtain those calories from. There's also suboptimal sources that you can obtain calories from. So let's say you take 2 athletes and you feed them both 2,500 calories a day. So they're both eating the exact same number of calories, but athlete number 1 eats 2,500 calories of whole foods with like a relative balance of proteins, fats, and carbs. And then athlete number 2 eats 2,500 calories, same number, but only Twinkies. That's all they eat, nothing else. Do you guys think, you can let me know, although I probably know your answer, do you guys think these athletes would perform the same? Do you think they would feel the same? And do you think they would look the same? Even if they're eating the exact same number of calories, 2,500 calories, but their foods choices and their calories are coming from different sources. So I'm gonna think you guys are gonna say no. And yeah, like there's a very high chance that the second athlete who's eating Twinkies is going to feel like garbage, and the athlete who's eating a balanced diet of whole foods is probably going to feel amazing. So that kind of brings me, sorry, my connection just cut out for a second. Hopefully you guys got that. It brings me to the question that I get sometimes, and maybe not just me, but people ask this question all the time, is why does it matter what you eat if you're hitting your calorie goal? And if you're hitting your calories and your macros, does it matter what you are eating? And the answer is absolutely yes, it does matter. Can you guys still hear me? My connection like cut out for a second. So if you can, let me know. I want to make sure that you guys can hear me before I keep going. I'm going to take a drink of water. Can you guys still hear me? Christina said, hell no. Hell no to the athletes, I'm assuming. Monica, of course. Margaret, no. Christina, yep. Okay, you guys can hear me. Perfect. Okay. So overall, and I'm sure you guys have heard this on like Instagram and Facebook groups and across every single fitness influencer, whatever, is be in a calorie deficit, be in a calorie deficit. And yeah, like that's the truth. You absolutely need to be in a calorie deficit to lose weight. But there are many other important concepts that still come into play. So being in a calorie deficit is great, But you can still optimize your nutrition much beyond just being in a calorie deficit. So I'm going to touch on a few big ones. I'm going to give you guys, I think there's 4 here in my notes, 4 concepts that you can use to optimize your nutrition. So the first concept is probably like the most basic and straightforward. And it's simply to ensure that you are eating enough carbs, enough proteins, enough fats, and to make sure you are hitting the targets that your coach sets for you, especially your protein. If you're not, again, side note, but there's that video, Pre-Plan Your Meals in MyFitnessPal. It's a game changer. I've never had someone watch that video and be like, oh, this didn't help me at all. It really, really, really helps. So the reason that hitting the macros and getting those macro targets in is so important is because a calorie from protein is different than a calorie from carbs or from fat, and vice versa, okay? So yes, 1 calorie still equates to 1 calorie, and there's the fact that each macronutrient contains a different number of calories per gram. So 1 gram of fat has 9, whereas 1 gram of protein and carbs have 4. But if you just take 1 single calorie from any of them, you're still just getting 1 calorie. But they each have a different molecular structure. So yes, they all equate to calories at the end of the day, but your body is going to use them for different things. Your body uses carbohydrates for different functions than it uses fats for, and it uses fats for different things than it uses protein for. So if you're not fueling yourself with the proper portions of macronutrients, even if you are in that calorie deficit, your progress is still going to be suboptimal at best. Is this making sense so far? Let me know. And again, like, this is one of the reasons, and usually people in like North American culture and even other cultures, I think, but especially like the way that we are and the way that our food is like marketed to us, it's super easy to overeat on carbs and fats and undereat on protein. That's just kind of like what the typical diet looks like. And that's one of the reasons why we generally get really bad cravings and urges to binge eat. Because let's say, hypothetically, we're eating 1,300 calories, but like 1,100 of them are coming from carbs and fats. Even if 1,300 calories is a calorie deficit for you, which for most people here watching, 1,300 calories will be a deficit for you. If the majority, like a large majority of your calories are just coming from carbs and fats, your hormones are going to be a little out of whack. And again, it's going to depend on how you're spacing those meals, but likely like your cortisol is going to be a little higher. Your hunger hormones are going to be a little messed up. You're going to be less insulin sensitive than you want to be. So you're going to become more insulin resistant if you're eating pretty much carbs and fats all day. And again, we want to be insulin sensitive. We want our body to absorb and utilize carbs for what we actually want it to use them for, which is fueling our body and giving our muscles like energy to train. So even if you are eating less or eating in a calorie deficit, you also want to ensure you are in a calorie deficit where you can have continued progress. So let's just take 1,300 calories, for example, because that's what I've been talking about. 1,300 calories is not a lot. I have eaten 1,300 calories on my diets before. I've eaten less than that as well. And I'm also like quite a small person, so that might not affect my body as much as it might affect someone else's body, but it's not a lot, right? So the key here is we want to ensure we can have that continued progress. We don't want 1 to 2 weeks of progress and 1 to 2 weeks of rebound because the deficit was too low. Okay? That's super, super important. You want to be in a calorie deficit, but a calorie deficit that allows your fat loss to continue for an extended period of time. I'm sure some people, I've done this back before I knew what the hell I was doing. I would just be like, I'm just going to eat less, and I would eat less, and I would eat less, and yeah, I would lose weight, whether it was weight or lean muscle or fat, whatever it was, I would lose it. but I would just gain it back because the deficit that I was putting myself in wasn't sustainable. A, because I wasn't hitting my macronutrients, so my body was like, what the hell are you doing? And B, because I was simply just not eating enough to fuel my body enough to continue doing what I was doing. So I would have a rebound, and then I would have to redo the work. So it's super important that the deficit that you're in is sustainable. And I'm not just telling you guys that because I want you to have slow progress. Like, I do not want you to have slow progress. I want you guys to have continued progress. And ultimately, in order to dial in long-term progress, you have to fuel your body and you have to get your body to work with you. Okay, concept number 2 to optimize your nutrition. This one is key. This one is like what's that part? What's that thing called? The climax. This is like the most important part of this video. Okay. Are you eating nutrient-dense foods? The majority of foods that you are consuming in your whole life, but especially when you're doing a program like this, and especially when you guys are training as hard as you can, 4 times a week, 5 times a week, you guys need to be eating whole foods the majority of the time. And whole foods are basically anything that is unprocessed. And unprocessed means, in my terminology anyways, it means it has not been touched or made by a human, okay? So there's varying degrees of processed foods, of course. So some examples of unprocessed carbs would be things like rice, beans, quinoa, berries, oranges, those types of things. Unprocessed proteins pretty much would be things like chicken breast, turkey breast, fish, shrimp, those types of things. For fats like avocados, egg yolks, all of those things are pretty much completely unprocessed. And then you have things that are moderately processed, which again, they're okay to have. Things like whole grain bread, wraps, chicken burgers, cheese, yogurt, natural peanut butter. I would classify those as moderately processed. And then you have your things like very processed foods. Things like sausages. Most sausages are quite processed. Most deli meats are quite processed. There's like more natural alternatives, definitely, but most deli meats are quite processed. Non-natural peanut butter, candy, bagels, muffins, all of those things that are basically just created by humans. Is this making sense so far? You guys with me? Okay, so with that being said, when I have a client who is unhappy with their progress, or who I feel like their progress is slower than it could be, but they're being relatively consistent with their macros and their calories and with their training. So again, this is just a client who's doing the work, doing everything right, but for whatever reason, either I feel their progress is slower or they feel their progress is slower. So the first thing that I look at when I have that situation is I look at like how much processed food are they eating, and then we work on reducing it. So I'm going to go into detail a little bit about this process. The amount we reduce the processed foods will depend on the client's lifestyle and the client's goals. So in a perfect world, sure, we would probably completely cut it out. Probably, realistically, but it's not a perfect world, and that's not really realistic for like 95% of people. So we kind of have to look at the pros and cons of each food in your life. So this is just an example. Could this person hypothetically substitute the bagel that they were having for breakfast for something like oats or something like fruit, or anything that's going to provide them more nutrients for the same amount of calories, or maybe even less calories, and that would also allow them to potentially have a higher volume option. So you could hypothetically be eating more food with more nutrients with less calories. Does that make sense so far? Yeah, I think I had another point, but then I forgot it. So anyway, moving on. So hypothetically, again, we're going to look at it. Like, is this person eating deli meat like every single day? Nothing wrong with eating it sometimes, but that's what I'm kind of looking for when I'm looking through your food diaries. And again, if this person's having like amazing results, I'm probably not going to harp on this too much because they're still progressing. But that's why we don't want to have anyone hit a plateau. I mean, plateaus are normal. They will happen to a point. You guys know my opinion on plateaus already. But like, we kind of want to continue this process. So once once we're identifying these foods, we're going to figure out, should we keep them, should we not keep them? There's also a mental and lifestyle component that comes into this. So maybe this person works shift work. Like we have a lot of shift workers in this group. So maybe they work 15-hour days some days and they don't realistically have as much time when they're on shift. So just another random example. Maybe they're taking a wrap to work. And okay, is a wrap, like the actual wrap itself, is that a better carbohydrate choice than rice? I mean, wraps aren't bad. Rice is less processed. So debatably that could be an option we could look at. However, even if rice is a better choice than a wrap for this person, sometimes we might not make that switch, because if that person realistically at that point in their life feels like they don't have time to make rice, well, it's better to choose the wrap, because if they don't, their other option might be to completely end up skipping that entire meal, not eating anything, and ending up eating like a bag of chips from a vending machine because they just didn't have time and they were hungry, right? So there's a lot of things we have to consider, and maybe this person is like, hell yeah, I'll just eat rice instead of having a wrap, no big deal. And then, okay, great, that was like a good switch. But it really, really depends on the client. And I'm not hating on wraps. Like, there's nothing wrong with wraps. I've just given an option of like a moderately processed food and a less processed, unprocessed food. Again, this isn't something I'm going to go too in depth with, but our body is very, very smart. So one of the reasons, in addition to the amount of nutrients that you get from unprocessed foods, is most unprocessed foods take your body longer to digest because they're less processed. They haven't been like broken down and changed up and modified, right? So when you eat an unprocessed food, it's going to take your body more energy and more calories to break it down. Even as simple as if you eat peanut butter, it's going to take you less calories to digest and absorb that peanut butter than it would be if you ate the peanuts. It's actually going to cause your body to work more to eat the peanuts. So not only are you likely getting higher volume food, lower calories, but your body is actually burning more calories eating the unprocessed food. Okay? Concept number 3 to optimize your nutrition. Meal timing. Okay? So after we look at the processed foods in the person's diet, the next thing that I look at is their meal timing. So if this person is already eating primarily all nutrient-dense foods that are all great choices, when are they eating these foods? Are they eating all of their carbs for breakfast and lunch and then all of their protein at supper time? Are they leaving their protein till the end of the day? Are they getting protein in at breakfast? Something I saw a bit in the last couple weeks was people some days getting protein in their breakfast, some days not even getting protein in until like way, way, way later in the day. And again, what works for each person is going to be different. And usually when people join, I tell them to start with evenly splitting up their meals. And honestly, that works really well for most people. As you guys know, some of you guys, we do have specialized things that we do a little bit differently. But for the most part, you want to aim to include all macronutrients in each meal, each time that you're eating. One of the reasons is we want to keep our blood sugar relatively stable. We don't want to be like spiking our hormones like crazy, and we want to make sure our body is staying relatively fueled. We don't want to be getting super, super hungry. We don't want to be getting way too full. We don't want to be like getting these weird insulin changes. And one other thing we don't want to do is snack all day long, even if you're hitting your macros. Because your digestive system needs a break. That's a mistake that I used to make, actually, even when I was competing. Because when I was competing, I was not eating a lot at all, but I would eat it all day because I wanted to eat so badly because I was not eating enough really for real life. And I would just eat all day. Like I had like these 1,100 calories, but I would break them into like these tiny little meals where I would eat them like every hour. I would eat like 10 meals all day long because I was like, I need food. So again, that's not great. It's not good for your insulin sensitivity. It's not good for your digestive system. Your body needs a break from food all the time. So this is just me speaking from my experience, but one thing that I do when I'm really trying to dial in my nutrition and essentially like lose fat is and again, you guys do not have to do this. This is just me sharing my what I do. I cut out my snacks. Like I don't have snacks. I just don't. I just eat meals. That's it. Because this is why I do it, because I find myself sometimes saying like, oh, I'm not that hungry, I'll just have a snack. And then an hour or two later, like, I'm still not that hungry, so I'll just have another snack. And then I'm still not that hungry, so I'll have another snack. So basically my rule of thumb is like, if I'm hungry enough for a snack, I'm hungry enough for a meal. Just eat the meal. And then I just eat the meal. And then I'm not hungry. And I don't have to worry about 2 more snacks because I just ate the meal. That works for me. Might not work for you guys. Another thing we want to look at is like, what time are you working out? And you want to make sure you're eating relatively soon after your training. There's that whole thing about what's it called? The window? I forget what it's called because I'm trying to speed it up because I just see the time is like 7:26. So I got to hurry up. But you want to make sure you're eating relatively soon after your training. Is it going to kill you if you don't eat immediately? Absolutely not. But why not? Why not refuel yourself? Yeah, okay, so, sorry, I'm trying to, like, make sure I get everything in here. One other thing is after your workout, you generally want to make sure you're getting a good amount of carbs and a good amount of protein. So you don't want to just eat, like, fats and protein after your training. You generally are going to want to replace your glycogen stores, and you want to eat some carbs as well, and protein. If you eat fat after your workout, for most people, it's not, like, a huge issue. If you like to, it's totally cool. If you don't like to, it's not going to affect you as much as if you decided to not eat protein or carbs after your training. So again, bringing it back to the whole meal timing thing, let's say you're eating 1,500 calories. Let's say you ate one meal of 1,500 calories. Probably not going to be optimal, right? We want to manage our hunger hormones. We want to manage our blood sugar. We want to manage our digestive system. If you're eating one meal of 1,500 calories or even 2 meals of 750 calories, you're probably going to get bloated. You're probably going to get hungry by the end of the day. So again, rule of thumb, I would say splitting your food between 3 to 6 meals would be optimal. I find with most people, the best kind of split is 4 to 5 meals. And you can have bigger ones, you can have smaller ones, but again, we want to kind of get away from that snacking mentality because you're just not that hungry. If you're hungry enough to eat a snack, just eat a meal. Okay, so I'm not going to talk about digestion. I was going to, but I don't think we're going to have enough time. I'm trying to cut the live streams down. Okay. So overall, if you're not hitting your targets, it's hard to determine as a coach if that's working for you or if it's not working just simply because of lack of compliance. Okay. Concept number 4 to optimize your nutrition is, what are your hunger levels? How hungry are you? Are you super full? Are you super hungry? If you are super full, choose more energy dense foods. Choose foods that have more calories per gram. And that doesn't mean you have to choose processed foods. Like rice has more carbs per gram than zucchini. If you're super hungry, choose high volume foods. Choose the zucchini instead of the rice. Because you're allowed to eat more zucchini than more rice for the same amount of carbs, and vice versa. Steak has more protein and more fat than chicken. So like if you're not very hungry, you could have a smaller piece of steak. If you're hungry, you could have like chicken and probably an avocado to make up for a smaller portion of steak. So you want to ensure that you are getting the calories you need, you're hitting the macro targets, but make sure you're asking yourself, like, how hungry am I? How much do I want to eat right now? Because sometimes I see people's food logs and they're eating like the lowest possible calorie foods, but they're so full because they have to eat so much to hit their targets. And then I see people who are like, I'm so starving, but they're eating the highest, like the most energy dense foods, meaning they contain a lot of calories. So usually, this part's important, if you are super hungry or super full, it's usually, not always, but it's usually not your macros or your calories that need adjusting. It's usually your food choices. Okay, I'm going to finish off the live stream with giving you guys 3 questions you can ask yourself to optimize your food choices, okay? So I'm going to give you the questions, and then I'm going to briefly explain them, and then I'm going to tune out because I'm trying to cut this one down, as you can see. Okay, so question 1, is this food conducive to my goal? Question number 2, how does this food make my body feel? Question number 3, does this food match my hunger levels and fit my targets? So when you're asking yourself that first question about the food being conducive to your goal, you want to look at things like, is this a processed food? Will or does this food trigger you? And at what time are you eating this food? After your workout, in the morning, what have you eaten in that day? Those types of things. When you're asking yourself question number 2 about how does this food make my body feel, you want to ask yourself things like, do I enjoy eating this food? Like, do I actually like this food? Does this food cause me any digestive issues? Does it make me feel bloated? Does it give me heartburn? Does this food bring up any emotions? And am I eating this food or not am I eating am I eating this food because I want to or because I feel obligated to? Because sometimes we are in situations, social situations generally, where we feel obligated to eat food, not because we want to, not because it's conducive to our goal, but because we feel pressure. So maybe you're at a work event, maybe you're at your parents' house, maybe you're at your friend's house. So again, that's a whole nother video that I did a little bit on before. We're going to talk about it again and how to combat kind of like those social pressures when we're trying to stick to a nutrition target. Third question about the food matching your hunger levels and fitting your calorie and macro targets. Ask yourself, like, how hungry are you? How full are you? How many calories and macros do you have left for the day? And how busy is your day? Because those are things that are all going to affect your choices. That is it. That is all.